Imagine stepping into an archaeological site, expecting to find ancient ruins, and instead stumbling upon a pyramid of human skulls. Sounds like the setup for a horror movie, right? Well, it's actually a terrifying reality that archaeologists have uncovered near the Templo Mayor, the main temple of the Aztec capital city in present-day Mexico City. It's one of the most brutal testimonies to ritual sacrifice ever discovered, with Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, and Tlaloc, the god of rain. These gods were central to the Aztec worldview. The goal was to offer up the life essence, or Netzali, which was believed to be concentrated in the heart. Well, it all had to do with their understanding of the universe. The Aztecs saw the world as being held in balance by day and night, light and dark, the living and the dead. They believed that the gods required regular nourishment to maintain this balance, and human hearts were the perfect food for the gods. Once removed, the heart was then presented to the gods as an offering, while the rest of the body was disposed of in various ways. The first thing you might be wondering is how many people were killed in these rituals. Well, estimates vary, but some scholars believe that up to 20,000 people were sacrificed each year. That's a lot of hearts. These offerings were likely intended to symbolize renewal and fertility, reflecting the importance of procreation in Aztec society. Sometimes it was thrown into a sacrificial pit, or the victims' limbs were chopped off and scattered around the city. By leaving the skulls on display, the Aztecs were declaring their imperial dominance and reminding their subjects of the gods' insatiable appetite for human life. By showcasing their ability to offer such a large number of human skulls, the Aztec nobility demonstrated their closeness to the gods. It was a way to legitimize their power and reinforce the idea that they were chosen by the gods to rule. It was a stark warning to those who didn't comply with the empire's demands. For them, these weren't seen as separate or even contradictory concepts. During religious festivals, the priests would bring the victims to the top of the structure, skewer them onto the wooden poles, and leave them to rot. This was a highly ritualized and symbolic act, meant to demonstrate the power of the gods and the authority of the priesthood. In fact, they were deeply intertwined. The very sites of worship were often places of bloodshed and sacrifice, symbolizing the intimate connection between the gods and human suffering. This wasn't done out of carelessness, but rather as a way to reinforce the message of death and sacrifice. The sight of decaying flesh was meant to remind everyone of the fleeting nature of life and the importance of appeasing the gods. Well, we don't have all the answers yet.
Oh.
But one possibility is that they were simply unlucky enough to be chosen. This created a macabre display that served as a warning to the living and a memorial to the dead. It's helping us better understand their spirituality, empire building, and the role of fear and spectacle in maintaining power. The sight of skulls served as a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the power of the ruling elite. It was a way to keep the population in check and prevent any potential uprising. For example, the Yagiro people of Mexico still practice ritualistic bloodletting. While this practice doesn't involve the same level of violence as the Aztecs, it does show the lasting impact of their beliefs. For the Aztecs, death wasn't seen as an ending, but as a transformation. And it forces us to confront the darker side of human nature. They believed that after death, the soul continued on a journey through the underworld. The goal of this journey was to reach the land of the living dead, where the deceased could live a peaceful existence. Aztec rulers often used human sacrifice as a way to appease the gods and ensure their continued favor. And one of the most important things it needed was food. That's where the ritual slaughter came in. By offering human hearts and blood, the Aztecs believed that they were providing the souls of the dead with the sustenance they needed to continue their journey. So if the emperor deemed it necessary to make an offering, he could demand that anyone be brought before the priests. Contrary to previous assumptions, the skull tower reveals that not all victims were warriors. We know that many of them were captured enemies, but evidence has also turned up pointing to local individuals being ritually offered as well. For example, some victims bore distinctive marks of their ethnic group, such as cranial deformation, a practice common among the neighboring cultures of the Valley of Mexico. In fact, many of them were young men, women, and even children. Out of the over 600 human skulls found so far, almost 200 belonged to young men between the ages of 13 and 29. Around 100 were women and girls, and 20 were under the age of 13. This suggests that anyone, regardless of social status or age, could be chosen for sacrifice. And the Aztecs believed that by offering human blood, they could sustain the cosmic balance and keep the world in order. Many of the victims unearthed at the Huey Tzompantli showed no signs of trauma, indicating that they weren't captives. Some even had jewelry and fine clothing, suggesting that they were members of the elite. So what exactly is this skull tower telling us about the Aztecs? Let's dive into the gruesome details. Death. In Nahuatl, the Aztec language, the skull tower is known as the Huey Tzompantli. The name roughly translates to place where the skulls are exposed, and expose them they did, as a testament to their power. The Aztecs were known to build these racks all over their conquered territories. In fact, when the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they reported seeing racks filled with human heads decorating the entrances to homes, adorning public buildings, and even acting as makeshift fences. According to the latest excavations, victims were skewered onto wooden poles and left to decay in plain view of the city. In total, the tower stood over 32 feet tall and around 49 feet wide at its base. That's the equivalent of a 3-story building made entirely of human remains. In terms of scale, archaeologists believe that this particular skull rack is unique. But the practice of displaying skulls in this way was common throughout Mesoamerica. So what exactly were these macabre displays all about? Well, they were mainly intended to honor two important deities. When we think of human sacrifice, we often imagine blood-soaked altars and terrified victims. But for the Aztecs, the process was more clinical and ceremonial. But why did the Aztecs choose such a gruesome method of worship? Now let's talk about who exactly was subjected to this fate. But here's another surprising detail. Previously, scholars believed that only prisoners of war and criminals were offered up as sacrifices, but these new findings challenged that idea. So who were these people, and why were they sacrificed? Another intriguing question is where the victims came from. What's more, certain individuals seem to have been particularly sought after, including pregnant women. As for why the skulls were left to decay in such a prominent location, it was a way to send a message to both the living and the dead. And it wasn't just a warning. It was also a tool for social control. Of course, this wasn't the only purpose of the skull tower. It also served as a powerful symbol of the divine authority of the ruling class. To really appreciate the impact of the skull tower, we need to understand the role of death in Aztec culture. But this journey wasn't easy. The soul had to overcome many obstacles. The placement of these skull towers near temples also tells us something about how the Aztecs viewed the relationship between violence and divinity. The construction of the skull tower was likely carried out by a special priesthood whose responsibilities included carrying out ceremonial killings. After the victims were skewered, their bodies were left to decompose in full view of the public. Once the flesh had decayed, the skulls were carefully removed from the poles and placed on the tower. Today, the discovery of the Pyramid of Skulls has given scholars an unprecedented look into the world of the Aztecs. But it's not just about the past. The Aztecs' obsession with human sacrifice is still seen in some modern religions. The discovery of the skull tower reminds us that the line between religion and violence can be thin. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and join us next time as we continue to explore the mysteries of the ancient world.